What's up, YouTubers? It's me, Johnny. I'm here in Sheila, Guatemala. I've been here for about a week now. Anyways, I'm making a short video on some of the news events, or not news events, some of the videos I've been watching lately, mainly because a lot of stuff I thought was going to happen is starting to happen. So, one of the channels I watched, not very often, I hadn't watched a video from, let me think now who it is, Cameron. Cameron redid his website and changed the name, so I can't even think of the name now. But anyways, he was just making an observation. He runs a business in the States, and a lot of contractors, small business owners are now starting to make you pay in advance for stuff they never used to. So you can't use your Visa or Mastercard anymore. You have to pay cash up front. He said that because more and more people are defaulting on their obligations. So, example, like a tow truck operator, had him pay cash in advance. There's people who provide window shields, like when you break them. Those guys have not everywhere, but in the bigger cities now, he's saying you need to pay cash in advance. You can't use a credit card anymore or put it on a credit card because so many people are doing chargebacks. Basically, the chargeback rate is going up so much that a lot of vendors aren't accepting credit cards anymore, or will only possibly accept them from their long-standing customers they've done business with. Why I'm talking about it is because this is what I figure would happen as the economy slows down. A lot of the credit card companies and banks lower your credit in case you're going to default or you're going to rack them up and not pay. Well, another thing that's happening that's related to that is Mastercard now is coming out with a policy. It's not a policy yet, but they're talking about it. What they're saying is to be compliant with the carbon credits and to be compliant with I can't remember if it's EOS or these new rules and laws, not laws, but these new policies of having a small carbon imprint on the environment. What they're doing is they're going to monitor what you spend on your credit card and then say you're spending too much on beef, too much on X, Y, and Z, whatever it happens to be. They're going to cap that. You can't use your credit card anymore to buy those things. So basically what they're doing is they're monitoring everything you spend. So like alcohol, cigarettes. In the past, if you bought alcohol, cigarettes, insurance companies grab that data and then use it to raise your insurance rates. Well, it sounds like that's what's possibly in the future, at least in the first world countries where your data on your credit card really isn't going to be private anymore. And they're going to use it in ways that's going to penalize you, especially if you're poor or lower middle class. Because from what I read on the Mastercard website, like you can buy credits, carbon credits, if you want to, do more things they don't approve of. And if you're wealthy, you can just do that. And there's other things like that where, I forget the other one, but they're basically going to let you buy your way out of it if you have the money. If you don't, they're just going to shut your credit card off and, you used up as much of your credit allowance because of the carbon imprint that you're putting on the environment. Another thing they're talking about is like, say you have an electric car or whatever. Once you use it so much, you can't use your credit card to do anything to refill, or a regular car. I just find it fascinating. Even if you use an electric car, you're going to plug in, they're going to monitor that and shut you down, so you just can't use your car anymore. Now, this is all just they're talking about it. I don't know how it's going to actually come out, but I find it fascinating that a lot of the vendors now won't accept credit cards because people are charging back too much. So like say you're traveling. That's why if you're traveling and doing lots of things, it's good to have backups. One of the backup could be Bitcoin because you can use it anywhere in the world. I just had one of my ATM cards. I tried to get some cash today. It won't let me do the transactions, but it's okay. I'm just going to transfer money from one bank account to another, use my other card, and that will be the end of that. But that's one thing in the news. I'm trying to think of some other things. There's more and more people making Plan B videos. I'll tell you one thing, like I was watching a video I haven't seen any content from Simon Black I used to be on his mailing list. I guess I'm not anymore. But anyways, I haven't seen any content from him in a long, long time. But he was doing a video on it, basically making a plan B. And he was making the same observation and point I would make about Western and Eastern Europe. He just said a lot of these Eastern European countries will be low tax. That's probably true, but a lot of them are copying the Western European plan to shut down their societies for COVID. And if that's an important thing for you, you might not want to relocate there. Now, if you're just going there to visit or domicile in the capital there, that's a different story. But like I've been talking about, like a lot of these Eastern European countries are copying the Western European rules and laws. So if you don't have your COVID ID, your COVID passport, your COVID QR code, whatever it's going to be, you can't do anything in those countries. Like in theory, Costa Rica is going to do that, but I don't see how they're going to enforce it. Eastern Europe and Western Europe are a little bit different where they actually try to enforce these things. Which brings up another subject about Western and Eastern Europe. I saw another video. It was basically another plan B, like where should we bug out to and all that kind of jazz. Should I get a passport or a residency in Western or Eastern Europe? And that's a personal thing and up to anyone. And like the guy in the video said, like if you can get a passport through your ancestry, just go ahead and get it. You can always not use it or not domicile capital there if they raise income tax or raise taxes in general. And that's what the video was about, more or less, that a lot of these European countries are going to raise taxes and have a lot more. You're not going to be exempt from taxes as much as you are now. And it's going to probably happen slowly over time. That's mainly why I don't like Europe. Like visiting there is one thing, but they're copying more and more of what the States is doing. They're more authoritarian. And that's why I prefer like the Caribbean or Latin America and some parts of Asia, But it really, really depends if you're going to live there a long time. Like if I'm going to Asia, I don't normally live there. I mean, I have in the past in the Philippines. And just living there as a tourist or on some kind of short-term visa. Like, for example, in theory, you can stay in the Philippines up to 3 years. And in the past, well, anyways, I had another visa there, which is different than that. But you can basically stay there 6 months, a year, fairly easy. Now, for me, usually after a year, I have to leave and go to another country because Asian culture sometimes gets on my nerves. I'm not saying anything bad about Asian culture. It just gets on my nerves. I got to take a vacation from my vacation, as Steve used to say. Anyways, that's why I tend to shy away from getting passports. Or if you are going to spend the time and effort and money to get a passport, I tend to look at Latin America more than Europe. That's really the only reason. Now, if you're fairly wealthy, like in this one video the guy made, he's pointing out he has a client. Allegedly, he has $100 million and he wouldn't even spend $1 million to get a passport in Europe because that'd be 1% of his capital. And a passport from Western Europe, where they really tax you highly, is not interesting for him, or at least his client. That's another reason why. Like, I don't have nothing against Sweden and some of these Northern European countries, like because people say, well, they didn't lock down. Yeah, but if you stay there a long time, you will just pay a lot of money for tax. But the other thing is, if you're still a young person, you still want to do business and trade, the regulations to do all these things can be really, really a pain in the ass. There, North America, whereas in Latin America and most of Asia, it's just not a thing. You can, no matter what, well, in my opinion, no matter what you hear about most of Asia or Latin America, you can, maybe something's prohibited, but usually nothing's really enforced. So if you keep a low profile, you can do what you want to do. And there was a few other things I was going to comment on the news or videos I've been seeing, but I can't remember now what they were. But it seems like the consensus right now from a lot of videos I'm watching is there's going to be a second lockdown. I'm not sure if that's true. I just read an article, I think it was a Yahoo News article about the United Kingdom saying people who have 2 shots, they're going to do the booster shot. Well, because people who have 2 shots are still getting sick and still flooding their hospital, allegedly flooding their hospitals, they might have to do another lockdown. They're just saying that. I don't think they will. But if they do, that's going to be devastating. If other countries copy that, they're just going to keep hurting their entrepreneurs and business people there and their working classes there. They're just going to get fed up and leave. In fact, I've commented in my videos, there's a lot of YouTuber influencers, a lot of these influencers, in my opinion, they're not too famous, but they've just already left. Same in Australia. It's starting to happen in New Zealand. They don't want to take any more chances, so they're just leaving. So it seems like the consensus right now is to get that plan B going as far as a residency. That's the main thing I think people need. They just need a residency where they can just go and do what they got to do for their business. That's what Simon Black, I was surprised Simon Black said. I haven't watched his content in a long time, but he had spent 2 or 3 months in Mexico during this last year or so. I don't know when, but he's famous for his estate down in Chile, or his living down there, things like that. But apparently he said in his video his wife was going to have a child, and he wanted to have his wife and child in Mexico because they can go to the hospital and he can just be there when this whole thing happens, which is, giving birth. Whereas in the United States, at that time, that wasn't even possible. So that's another thing. People want these perfect places to go, but there's no perfect place to go. So you got to pick what you really value. And I like Mexico and say Brazil. I haven't been there, but because they're such big countries, as Simon's pointed out, in one part of the country, they might have to wear masks, or there might be some problems, but another part of the country, because it's so big, there's a totally different policy. Whereas he was in the Cancun area where people just fly and do what they want. I just crossed the land border. Now, everyone said it was closed, but it's never really been closed. Back and forth, not a lot, but a little bit. But anyways, it's so big, you can just go where you want. And that's another point. Like, I've been watching Mark Moss's videos. I didn't know his philosophy too much, but watch him, I kind of like him more and more. Apparently, he's building a house on the West Coast in the desert area. Even though he's a surfer, and even though his wife and him and his kids, they fly around the world surfing, and normally in the past he spent most of his time in southern Mexico, in Oaxaca, where the beach, well, not resorts, but where the surf places are. There's resorts there too, but where the surf places are. But because of the jungle, like he just said, the whole atmosphere is different than in the desert, which I agree with. I actually like that. The only problem is where he's building a house is kind of expensive, but I mean, if you can afford it. But there's these, as he puts it, there's these, I don't want to say undiscovered, but low population areas in Latin America and Mexico, El Salvador, that people just do not go to, that are super cheap. And if everything just fell apart in Western Europe or Eastern Europe and North America, you could just go to these places, do whatever the hell you want. Swim, surf, fish, run your online business, and no one's going to bother you. I tend to agree with that. And that's one thing about Mexico. It's so big. You can do something in this part of the country, go to this part of the country for other things, and that's what's cool. The other thing is you can just work online now. And so you don't really have to live where you don't like being. And my point just is, like, there's no perfect place to go, but you can get a mix of things that you want. And then when things, if you don't like the way things are going, just move somewhere else, or just spend 3 or 4 months here, 3 or 4 months there, to kind of get what you need for your lifestyle choice. And I think I'm trying to think of the other thing Mark Moss mentioned, because he's a surfer. He likes hanging out more, and from what I gather, in Mexico than El Salvador. But there's quite a few nice places in El Salvador too. You can, really small places no one ever goes to. They're very, very super, super cheap. I would say anyone on a budget could live in these places for under $1,000. Well, for me anyways, under $1,000 easy. I hate saying it, but people are going to get pissed off. But there's a place you can live in Mexico, and if you want, you can live in Mexico for $500 or $600. But you just have to pick the right area that's really low cost, where there's not a lot of gringos. And over time, as gringos pile into these places, the cost of living goes up. So you would need to be open-minded and willing to move around, unless you want to buy a house or something, which is not for me. I'm not interested in building a house or buying it, at least not right now. And there's a few other things I was going to mention, but like I said, they're not coming to me. But it seems like the ethos right now is more and more people are just saying the heck with it. They're leaving. And like I said, with Mastercard, a lot of first world countries, ATM and on Mastercard, they're going to make it harder and harder for you to use overseas. You're going to have a social score. You're going to have a carbon credit score, and if you go over, they're going to shut you off. So you really need a legal residency and banking options, and or some kind of Bitcoin option, so you can move your money around and pay for your expenses, because it's getting to the point where they're going to shut things off. Like Mark Carney, like Mark Moss mentioned Mark Carney. I'm not sure if he's still the head of the bank in England, but he's a Canadian. He's got this piece where he says, oh, you're not going to eat beef anymore. You're not going to be able to drive your car. You're not going to be able to use an airplane unless you're very, very wealthy, because only wealthy people can travel because they can pay these special carbon taxes and stuff like that. And so poor people, you're just going to be stuck where you are. He basically said that. It's right up on his, well, I don't remember which website it's on. But like, it's not just like people think it's these left-wingers. There's a lot of left-wing and right-wingers. They just, if you're poor or lower middle class, they're going to make laws. At least they're going to try to make laws and enforce laws where you can't travel. You can't spend the money you've accumulated the way you want to. You cannot live or move out of jurisdiction to go to another jurisdiction unless you have enough, credits or points to move from one part of the U.S. to another. That's what their plan is. I don't think they're going to succeed, but right now they're going to try to lay it out and try to do it. We'll see how it goes. These things are being done really, really heavily in Western Europe and Eastern Europe. That's my main misgiving about Eastern Europe and Western Europe. It's maybe you can get low tax there for now. And sure, you can always move out if that's a concern of yours. But the fact that you're going to need all these, I don't want to call it electronic ID, but a QR code, paper documents saying you have the shots and whatever additional shots you're going to need. Else you can't go into a bank. You can't get in an airplane. So you're just stuck wherever you are. You can't buy anything. Even if you accumulated wealth and you want to spend it buying whatever you want to buy. They're going to try to do this. I don't think they're going to succeed, but some countries are going to try harder than others. And for me, Europe is just, the way their culture is, they're just, like I said in a previous, culturally they want this. They embrace it. They want to get chips inside their bodies. They want to like put in prison or deny healthcare to people they don't like. All I can say is just go back to World War I and World War II. You could see this is not the first time this has happened, and they're going to unfortunately try it again. It's really unfortunate, but it seems now they've grabbed the apparatus or the power of government, and they're going to try to do the best they can to enforce this. Even in these so-called conservative places, they're going to try to. I don't know if they can succeed. And anyways, that's why I prefer Latin America. Another good country, big country, if you're looking for a big country where regions are different as Brazil, stuff like that. And there's parts of Brazil that can be quite regulated, but it's quite safe. Other parts where it's just the opposite of that. And then there's parts kind of in between. So you can kind of choose what you want, like if you want the beach life or run a business. And if you have an online business, most of everything I'm talking about doesn't really apply. You just need to domicile it where it's going to be lower, not taxed at all, which more and more nowadays is easier and easier to do. The information is getting out. The media can't really hide this anymore. Like, it wasn't the Panama Papers, but the latest papers that came, it's getting harder and harder to hide. Like, I think it's South Dakota where people are domiciling their businesses and paying pretty much no tax. And they're not breaking any laws. And I don't see that changing because the United States wants to be the biggest tax haven in the world. They just don't want Americans not paying tax. But the information is getting out there. It's getting easy to intercept, really cheap, LLC. Now, administrating over time is going to cost you money. But if you're making a lot of money, paying $1,000, a couple thousand a year to pay zero tax, I mean, you're going to do it. At least I think more and more people are going to choose that option. Then once you get overseas, there's other countries where that can be even cheaper or more, depending on where you're at. But the United States is not going to go out of the tax haven business, in my opinion. They're going to badmouth other countries while they make it easier for foreigners to come here, set up their stuff in Nevada, South Dakota, and other places, Delaware even, and get no or virtually no tax. Anyways, that's kind of what I've been seeing here on the weekend, or we're getting close to the weekend from all the information I've been following. And one of my acquaintances in Brazil, he's retiring from his teaching English stuff, so he's handing off his clients. It's kind of interesting. He makes pretty good money. I'm surprised he's retiring. But he's going to just travel more full-time in Asia. So look for Asia to open to see more and more people go there. Check it out. I mean, heck, if you can make $12 to $15 an hour just teaching English, you're just going to see a lot of people leaving the U.S. just to do that. And that's just one of many things you can do to earn income online. Depending on how much you make, you don't even pay that much tax. And you could set it up so you don't really pay any tax. And, you can basically charge like $6, $7, $8 to live on. The rest you could just save. Or, look at another way. You just work like a dog during the week, like Monday through Thursday. Then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you don't work at all. And there's just so many options where you can do that, and then just live wherever you want in the world, travel on the weekends, have a 3-day weekend, and not be, I don't know, limited with all these new rules and regulations on travel. Again, it's still kind of up in the air about Asia. I've heard Philippines is not open yet, but I think they're going to be open up soon. But you can fly into Thailand, at least from Mexico and Guatemala, pretty cheap. Trouble is, if you're flying from here, you got to quarantine. Whereas if you're flying from California in the States, you don't have to do that. I'm not sure, like if I went back there, if I have to prove it because I've crossed by the land border. I don't think they'd even know. Anyhow, until a lot of this gets worked out, I personally don't think there's going to be a lot of travel, but we'll have to wait and see. But as these economies open up and countries who decide they're never going to close, they're going to get a lot of business. As economies decide they're going to reclose, I think it's going to be devastating. We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, hey, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, and I hope my viewers have a good weekend.